Good day, viewers, and welcome to another program of Political Scope. My name is Stacey Carmichael James, and with me today to discuss the civil aviation sector is the Honorable Transport Minister, Robeson Ben. Good day, Minister, and it's a pleasure having you on the program today.
Thank you, Stacey.
Well, today we'll be discussing all the developments in the civil aviation sector. But before we go into the nitty gritty, could you give us a brief overview of the performance of the sector over the past few years? Some developments.
Well, basically, um, the sector is growing tremendously. It has grown dramatically over the last 5 years, I'd say at least. Our statistics are still being updated continuously. But for domestic aviation, we have, say, out of Ogle, which is now an international regional airport with international passenger arrivals, over 126 movements per day, meaning aircraft takes offing and landing. And you would double the total movement for the entire country. So nationally, we would say, in terms of aircraft movement, we would have for domestic activities 300 movements per day, which is why there's a constant takeoff and landing going on at Ogle itself. And then we have the international movements from CGIA itself, which has also seen an increase in movements and in international overflights from countries beyond Guyana, planes flying over for which we have to provide air navigation services. There has been a tremendous increase. For international travel, there has been a change of the navigation systems to GIS, GPS arrangements, management, so that flight distances and the areas which are overflown by third-party countries, they're more efficient. And Guyana's geostrategic position in North America has meant that flights from Peru and Chile going on to Western Europe directly overfly Guyana now, and we've seen more than a 10% increase in overflights for air navigation services management flying over Guyana.
Okay, Minister, thank you for that information. Now, you said that technology-wise, we're improving. Are there any plans to go further? Any other technological advancement we can expect in the near future in terms of aviation?
Well, the significant technological advance in terms of navigation services is that we have adopted what is called an automatic dependency surveillance system. We're one of the only countries now in South America which has bought into this system separate from radar systems. This means that flights coming into Guyana and overflying can be continuously tracked in our national airspace. This is more efficient for flight times, arrival times, issues related to tracking with respect to weather and so on. And it means that we are better able to do the air traffic control management with respect to international overflights. So we have significantly upgraded the systems in the air traffic control tower at CGIA and also at Ogle with respect to this new system for the tracking and efficient management and handling of aircraft in our sovereign airspace. There's some work which has to be done now to expand its reach by way of antenna systems in certain areas of the country, more for domestic operators, domestic operations primarily. But we have just launched this system. Our air traffic controllers are being trained in it, and we will continue to build out the system in the next 3 years.
Okay. And in terms of, we had a recent incident. We had one I think, a year ago with the pilot disappearing with the cargo loader. We had a similar incident recently. So the question arises, how safe is it for our pilots to fly? What are some of the measures being put in place?
First off, let me assure the general public that flying is the safest form of transport, not only in Guyana, but also internationally. Travel by aircraft is still the safest form of travel. The incidents we've had in 2014, where we had a loss of aircraft and two crewmen out of Olive Creek, and the just attempted search and rescue mission with respect to the flight going over from Madi to Carisparrow have occurred with activities which were not the carrying of passengers. So it didn't happen in respect of the carrying of passengers, passenger traffic. These were shuttle missions. We So on the face of it, those issues with the loss of the aircraft and the crew related significantly to the fact that it did not occur in carrying passengers. It was not for a carrying of people. Significantly, for the one that occurred in the out of Olive Creek, that one was a question of engine failure on the aircraft, which we have notified in our reports, which are now public, on the investigation, and for which the issue has been examined. The stripping of the engine was done together with the Pratt & Whitney, the manufacturers of the engine. That issue will work out itself in respect of liabilities with respect to the people who were impacted and the firm which lost its aircraft. In the most recent situation, and let me take the opportunity to express condolences to the relatives, the family, the wife, and the parents of pilot Nicholas Passad and Mr. Bisnot, the aircraft loader. This is a work in progress with respect to why perhaps we've lost the aircraft and the crew. We've not found them as yet. We spent 21 days searching. The shuttle mission that they were undertaking took off in clear weather, and the reports at Carisparrow was that the weather was fine for the operation. So it appears that en route there were issues of weather, and until we get more information, until perhaps sometime we encounter the aircraft by some means, we wouldn't be able to conclude fully on what the issues are, but the investigation will continue and the report will be done and will remain open until we find some resolution in terms of the wreckage and of the crew. But I want to reassure the general public again that flying is the safest form of transportation in Guyana. There's a lot of investment going into the human resources with respect to pilot training, the training of engineers, the training of air traffic controllers, the oversight system with respect to their operations. There are gaps with some of that, but we work with the Caribbean Air Safety Oversight System with respect to these issues, where we share resources and information where there are gaps in the system. But fundamentally, we have to keep working to create a much safer environment in respect of all forms of transportation in our country. And we have to accept too and to understand too that our country is so large, relatively speaking, in terms of the population, and that we have challenging terrain, jungle, forests, mountains, and the probabilities of finding an aircraft under the circumstances just described is fairly low. And this is why I have required the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority to make sure that every pilot on every aircraft which is outfitted, which has to be outfitted with a spot tracker system for sending out signals with respect to the location, that signals be sent out at least on a 2.5 minute interval. In the current situation, the current problem, the spot tracker systems were sending out signals from the transponders at 10-minute intervals, in which case the aircraft could have traveled or would have traveled 20 miles between signals. We would bring it down to the lowest level now, uh, given the terrain, where we'll have within a 4 mile uh, length of travel a signal, so that it would make it easy with respect to location of aircraft as they travel and in case there is any need for a search and rescue mission.
Okay, thank you.
Let me also
mm-hmm.
take the opportunity, ma'am, to thank the company Air Services Limited and the pilots of their company and the management with respect to the efforts for the search and rescue, and also significantly the Guyana Defense Force, Brigadier Mark Phillips, his pilots from the Air Corps, and the Special Forces of the Guyana Defense Force, and all the residents and other miners, the pork knockers, and also the search and rescue people from the Civil Aviation Authority and the Ministry and the associated groupings with respect to the effort for this activity.
Sure, thank you. And before we move off this topic, what about inspection? Some persons have been questioning how often are aircraft inspected. Could you give us some insight?
There is the requirement with respect to the operations of the aircraft for them to be inspected and managed at the level of the flight operations, at the level of the companies. There is also in the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority inspectors for airworthiness, inspectors for ramp inspections, inspectors to make sure that with respect to the way the manuals are written with respect to the operations of the aircraft, that they do runs and checks and confirmations and certifications with respect to the operations of the aircraft. Where we've had challenges is in respect to the flight operations inspection. This problem is not unique to Guyana itself. It's a problem throughout the Caribbean. I would say for many third world countries, it's a problem with respect to getting enough continuous online flight operations inspections from the regulatory agency. The prices are high. It's very expensive to get those people. Even when we get them, they don't stay long because the skill, the expertise is in demand worldwide, and perhaps in more favorable circumstances than ourselves, the United States or Canada compared to Guyana. And this is an area which we keep working on, we continuously working on. And as I have said, our fallback is the Caribbean Air Safety Oversight System, where with respect to these questions, where there are gaps or where we can overlap between Suriname or Trinidad or Barbados or Jamaica, we get the engagement with respect to these issues, the support from them with respect to particular areas where we have gaps, as it were, and to share the resources.
Thank you. Now, in terms of the development of airstrips, let's just go to the hinterland locations. How has the performance been in that area, development of hinterland airstrips?
I think it's fairly adequate. We have a maintenance system through the ministry itself. We have an aerodromes department, as it is, or a unit. We have an inspector, and he has an engineer specific with respect to the civil activities for construction engineering activities in support, or engineers in support. And there are maintenance persons out in the interior, in the hinterland, with respect to 46 government controlled or owned aerodromes. So the issues of the approach and takeoff areas in terms of the clearance for trees, The issues of weeding and patching where necessary, those are issues which they work at constantly. Certainly, there can be improvements as we go along, but we have continuously managed to upgrade some of these airstrips from dirt or sand and gravel airstrips to some of them, the more heavily used ones, to asphaltic bituminous surfaces. So that's an improvement for the more heavily used ones. So the fact that some of the airstrips are gravel or loam or lateritic surfaces airstrips is not an issue in itself. This is normal in fairly underutilized areas for you to have that type of surface. I think there's a notion for some people that if you have an airstrip, it must have an asphaltic surface. This is not the case in other countries. I've landed at airstrips in the Yukon and Canada, which are gravel surfaces, and in South Africa itself too, lateritic type surfaces. It's very expensive to move bituminous material where you don't have roads to access the area. So the airstrip surface is satisfactory. I think what has been happening is that there is a call now that we're having an expansion in the activity in the area, in the sector, for us to do all of these airstrips by bituminous surfaces. It's very expensive. I'm not sure that the industry at this point in time would want to pay the additional monies which would be required to allow this to happen. And I think at the moment we are working under the optimum conditions for the sector in respect of hinterland airstrips.
Okay, thank you very much. What about the Chelly Jagan International Airport? Well, we know that government had budgeted for the expansion project, but of course that was cut in the budget. Some funds were restored. Could we get an update on the expansion project?
Well, the expansion project is on the way. We need to recall that we did have an approval through the Parliament for the mobilization funds for this project, and that was paid and that the contractor was mobilized. And that we had undertaken at that time, we all acknowledged to our Parliament that we needed to have the 1,000 meter extension of the runway to make it safe. You might remember the Caribbean Airlines end of runway mishap some years ago. And that we needed also to have a new terminal building for the airport. 16,000 square meters is what the new terminal building will be. Modern, efficient, spacious enough for the handling of passengers. The project has had some issues with respect to ground conditions, which the engineers are working at refining the best solution and the best areas for the runway extension. And we've had the problem which has been growing over the years of squatting in the more risky portions of the area, which compromises one, our international accreditation for the operations of an international airport facility. So that's extremely critical. And secondly, of course, it poses a risk to people on the ground as we go. Not to mention the hemming in of possibilities for the expansion even as we go forward. The embankment fill has started on the northern end. It is progressing. There has been some slippage in terms of time, as I said, because of the issues with respect to ground conditions, but it has to go forward. It is going forward. We have called on the residents in the area who have been identified in phase 1, phase 2, particularly areas for the relocation of squatters, to meet with the airport authorities or myself, to get into the arrangements for either getting land for housing elsewhere, whether it's Yarra Cabra or the east bank of Demerara or the west bank of Demerara. And in the case of farmers who would be impacted, that they meet with us so that we route them in a formal way to the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission and Ministry of Agriculture so that they could get land in replacement to continue their livelihood activities. But certainly the project is bigger than any single person or community. And it couldn't be the solution which was mooted in other quarters that we abandon that airport and go over the river and build another airport, because then the price for it will be 6 or 7 times higher than what it is currently.
Okay. As we're on the point of another airstrip, my next question would have been to you: are there any plans in the, no, I guess not near future, but distant future, for the building of another international accredited airport? Is there
We
any
are
plans?
working at the design feasibility level since early last year with respect to LETM. We anticipate that with the cross-border trade and the more efficient networking of aircraft arrangements in South America itself, which is still weak, which is one of the issues which UNISOR has been looking with the government of Guyana, along with the total transport network under what is called COSI plan, the integration of the South American transport network itself, that two places will come into play with respect to regional type airports of the kind like Ogle. We expect that to be LETM, so we're at the design feasibility study with respect to that. Our engineers and air traffic people have been to Bovista to see their airport, to do the initial feasibility concept documents with respect to traffic management and so on, and also to better understand what the domestic market, the regional market is there with respect to it. So there's LETM, which already has a long asphaltic surface runway, but we think too, notionally at this time, that Mabaruma will be a significant one going forward into the future after LETM. And so we are taking a cursory look at LETM too with respect to developments there for people who may want to go over to certain parts in Venezuela or Trinidad or Barbados from that regional center. There would not be a need to come back all the way to Georgetown to make the jump regionally there, but that Mabaruma will come into play as we go forward into the next decade or so.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. Let's touch on the issue of new operators coming into the system.
Well, we've had at the international level, we've had Conviasa, we've had Dynamic Airways, which has had some issue. We've had Fly Jamaica, we've had Insel Air, and we've had Copa. Those are 5 new international operators who have come into the system and who are maintaining and sustaining our effort in the sector. We have signed on to an agreement with an international company, Roots Development, the CGIA and GCAA, and we are attending and working with them towards attracting new operators at the international level coming into our country to make it more competitive, more dynamic, more efficient, and that it networks better with the opportunities in South America and elsewhere. So, of course, we can't talk about who we might actually be speaking to, but we're visiting again with Roots with respect to new operators coming in. And we have just had meetings in Indonesia where we signed on to agreements with 13 countries, with respect to them coming to Guyana in the future, bringing passengers from Asia, from Africa, from other parts of Latin America, and from the Near East. So we did have a successful visit in Indonesia, and our engagement with Roots International has been quite good. But the significant thing is, for all of this to be possible, and for us to have long-haul, wide-bodied, large carrying capacity aircraft to come to our country, which would disgorge 400 passengers on landing at cheap fares, and we'll be able to have cheaper fares going out of Guyana. We have to have the runway extension at CGIA and a large, new, efficient terminal building.
Correct. And Minister, what about domestic operators? Is there a need for more domestic operators?
Well, I don't want to speak to the question so much of more operators. We have, on request at the moment, some 15 new planes to come into the domestic operations. We've have JAGS Aviation, which is bringing in 5 new planes, a new player really in terms of number of aircraft. Air Services itself is bringing in 2. We have a request from Trans-Guyana Airways, and we have some other individual requests from other companies. So at the level of domestic operations, the number of aircraft has about tripled over the last 10 years, and the number of pilots have doubled over 3 years, pilots and engineers and other technical specialists with respect to the activities. And there are 2 approaches. One, the companies which exist already are expanding, and then there are some smaller companies, some new kids in the block, as it were, who are coming into it and improving the sector. There is an worldwide shortage of specialists in the aviation sector. So even in Guyana itself, domestically, we need more pilots, we need more engineers, we need more air traffic controllers. We are just now going to speak again with the Guyana Defense Forces Air Wing with respect to working together to find a way to do pilot training through the GCAA along with the Army. We have spoken with Trinidad, where we're spending, together with them, we have some $60 million where we're spending for training for the air traffic controllers and inspectors for the aircraft and for pilots. Beyond what we do now at the air traffic control school, there's a school there at the tower at Timeri where our young people are guiding the planes in and out safely. We are one of the only countries in the Caribbean which has both both an air traffic control school, a flight training school through Air Services. They have been operating one at fairly small at the moment, and the training for engineers and mechanics. We have a school too at Ogle being run there through that public-private partnership at Ogle. So we have these 3 things, but they need to be expanded. There's a great demand for the developments in the sector in respect of these specialities. I think Dynamic just finished training 30 or something, can't remember the number of air hostesses for their planes. I had a recent engagement when we were sharing out the education 10,000 grant where I was at a school, and we asked some of the young people what they wanted to be when they grew up. And one of them said, a young lady said, an air hostess. And I said to her, we want you to fly the plane. So we are taking a whole of our country in terms of its development. We would like our young people to have, in terms of their professional development, a good horizon with respect to what the opportunities are there so that they could affix themselves, center themselves with respect to what the opportunities are. And we want them to be our engineers or pilots or air traffic controllers. Those opportunities are there. Of course, you have to study more in terms of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But there's where the demand is, and that's where the opportunities are in the sector, not only in Guyana, but internationally.
Okay, thank you. The Guyana Civil Aviation Authority had signed an open skies agreement with Canada. I think it was November last. Can't remember the exact date. Could we get an update on how that agreement has been going? How has it
Well,
benefited Guyana?
we've had a number of open skies agreements, and we've also signed one with the United States of America. The intention as we go forward and when we get the airport expansion, and given the fact too that we've had these initials and signings with the other 13 countries in Indonesia, is that the arrangements, the regulations, the opportunity for flight between the countries will be more efficient. And we are also working on the issue of what we call Category 1 status with respect to going to the United States for when we get, indeed, a renewed Guyana national carrier originating out of Guyana and going to the United States, that we will be ready with respect to all the issues, regulations, oversight, administration, to meet all the criteria which they have out there. Since we've had 9/11, the issues with respect to safety and security are being more rigorously scrutinized. We've just had 2 days ago the end of a visit with the Transportation Safety Administration of the United States, where we're looking at the issues of aircraft, airline safety, and meeting all the parameters which we've established together with them. These things are going fairly well, but we have to transit what is a fairly old system to a new arrangement. One of the requirements we seem to be having, and we've also had yesterday a visit from the International Civil Aviation Authority Oversight System for South America. The people who came from their headquarters are from Peru. So we're having, we've just had such an audit of how we've progressed over the years and where we might have fallen down, where we might have had slippages, things which we have to pay additional attention to for both the security and for the aviation oversight to improve flying into and out of our country in the sector.
Okay, thank you. In terms of legislation, is there any plans, any drafting of any new legislation to govern the sector more efficiently?
Yes, we have now in the Civil Aviation Authority a General Counsel office. We have a trained, efficient, qualified lawyer heading up. We are staffing the area. We have legislation which is in draft and more to do, and which has accord with what obtains out of the requirements of ICAO and the Transportation Safety Administration. We're working at those documents, at that legislation, to bring to the Parliament too, with respect to changes in the legislations to accord with what is the international best practices, and to, as I said, transit us to a new situation in keeping with the new imperatives of air traffic safety and travel. So the legislation will come. One of the requirements that is being mooted to us is that we may have to take out from the Guyana Civil Aviation Authority, which has the regulatory support services and oversight responsibilities, that the air navigation services, the service provider, in respect of that activity at the tower, that may have to be separated out of the Civil Aviation Authority itself, so that they would be clear, dispassionate oversight of the service in respect of air traffic control for better safety management. So those are some of the issues that are now coming up, and we're reviewing out of the visits we've just had yesterday with the ICAO office out of Peru.
Okay then. Before we close off, Minister, could you give us some projections for the sector for this year and maybe next year?
In terms of the projections, we have some proposals. We have had restored to us some issues with respect to the cuts which were put in the budget, on the budget of 2014. You know that the interior aerodrome, the hinterland aerodromes were cut in the Parliament by the combine opposition. We view that as highly unfortunate because it affected Amerindian communities and other hinterland communities. And I always say that our Amerindian and hinterland communities, that their lives, their existence is at greater risk, and they depend in the remotest areas solely on aircraft operations. We know that we have frequently nighttime emergency medical flights and other flights to support the communities. So to make sure that things are kept on even keel and that our people out there in the interior are safe, we have had those cuts restored, and the aerodromes which were affected are being repaired or upgraded now. And we've had the inclusion of Parima and Philippi, two hinterland communities in the Pacaraimos and the Western Escarpment. They are being worked at too, so that we are in a better position with respect to support to the communities, their health, their education, their safety, and all those issues. So we are doing that. The other issues relate to improvements overall, as I've said, with respect to aircraft management, tracking, search and rescue. We have the larger improvements which we're looking at with respect to improving, optimizing aircraft travel into CGIA as it exists. OGLE speaks volumes for itself. We've had situations now where people can fly from Barbados or Antigua, and when they land at OGLE, they are home in 7 minutes or less. An astounding result, and a signal achievement of the government, PPPC, with respect to pushing forward public-private partnerships, that model of development to propel our economy. So we intend to pay special attention, continuing to the questions of training towards getting our young people qualified and educated in this sector. I've talked about the monies we have for training. We intend to hire new people for training for air traffic control. I said that we intend to put out ads and to train through the Civil Aviation Authority itself, pilots together with the Army, and engineers and technicians. There's a whole gamut and array of technical and administrative support services needed in the area. And our Guyanese young people have to be leading from the front with respect to this. We expect and we want to facilitate that. So, of course, we've talked about the CGI expansion and the large investment which has to go into it. The investment, the engineering, oversight, and management, all the issues with respect to relocation of squatters, all those things will have to be worked out, and the improvement of on-the-ground safety systems. We will continue to work at in respect of the development. We note, and we've had the investment of Gaioil in terms of new fuel handling facilities at CGIA. It is bringing down, I understand, the prices per gallon of fuel from some $4, almost $5 per US dollars per gallon to some $3.30 or something. And we think that this will have a significant effect on travel and on ticket prices eventually as it continues. And we want to continue to work with the sector, with the stakeholders in the sector to improve safety, quality of operations, regulatory oversight, training, and it should all come together synergistically to have better services, better safety, and lower ticket prices.
Okay, Minister, before we close, there was one issue I wanted to touch with you. While you addressed safety measures and so forth, in terms of security, airport security, how do we intend to match what occurs international? Because there are so many things coming up now in terms of airport security. It's not just about terrorist threats or anything like that alone, but there's also diseases. We had the Ebola and stuff. What at the level, the civil aviation, at your sector level, what measures are being implemented
Yeah, significantly, say with the Ebola itself, I think we've had a successful engagement so far with respect to the matter. We've put all the systems, the surveillance in place. I know that Sierra Leone is declaring itself basically Ebola free just now, and the first stage of panic with respect to the problem has passed. And we have been able, along with the Ministry of Health, Dr. Shamdio, and others there, the Minister of Health too, Dr. Biri Ramsaran, we've been able to put together and work together to put in place the medical surveillance system and the isolation facilities with respect to Ebola, both at the CGIA and at Ogle. So we've gained experience with respect to this matter. For aviation safety oversight, inspections, security, at the base level, other than the protocols being improved and the training being in place, we have had to go over at CGIA to employing through the airport itself aviation security officers. This is in part because we were not able to get the manning level that was required out of the special constabulary of the Guyana Police Force. And we have employed, I believe, now 120 young people mostly to become aviation security officers. I think we're going out to hire another 40 people so that we have full manning with redundancy at all levels. We have put in new surveillance systems, so there are cameras almost in every area that you would maneuver around the airport, and it's recorded, and you can review when there is suspicious activity and the carnor or the police have to be involved. The information and the activities are monitored from the airport. We continue to work with the Guyana Police Force, with their K9 unit with respect to problems of drug smuggling. There's a lot of noise about drugs being found in the United States, but I would say more than double of the drugs discovered in relation to transit in Guyana or attempted transit to Guyana or out of Guyana have been found in at the airport itself. Those are some of it's a constant challenge which you have to work at. You have to have aviation security system in place that is satisfactory. Whatever system we have will be challenged by those who want to do these nefarious things and illegal things. And we have to raise the profile and raise the training of the officers out there as we go along. And this was the subject of the discussion we had with the Transportation Safety Administration with respect to their posture, their assertiveness, their energy levels, and the system of managing and monitoring them as they do their task. But I think on balance, we have a fairly good system in place. And we've always been passed by the TSA and ICAO with respect to this matter.
Okay then. Well, thank you so much, Minister Ben, for being on the program with me and discussing these issues. I do look forward to another program with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much for having
You're
me.
welcome. And thank you so much, viewers, for joining us on Political Scope. Do join us again. My name is Stacey Carmichael James, and with me today was the Honorable Minister of Transport, Robeson Ben. Have a good day.